So I'm going to just show you briefly just what this is. Remember, her leg is taped up here. These measurements that you're going to get, again, you can see them from the lab manual, which you hopefully have in front of you, or actually should be taped into your book at this point as the methods. And then we have this distance basically from the pivot of her knee to the floor. That is going to be this distance we're calling B. And then when she kicks out, she's going to kick out to some distance. There's going to be some angle here, angle theta. The distance that describes just on the linear bottom of the triangle of how far she kicked out is A. So there you've got, so these are the values. You're going to get B, which is just the length from the pivot of the knee to the floor. And you're going to get 3 values of A, because remember, we do this 3 different times to get an average. So when we're doing this, each group is going to get a value for B in centimeters and 3 values for A. And you're going to have to calculate what was the average angle. And the formula is in your lab book. It's that arctan of A divided by B. And again, make sure your calculator is doing trigonometry in degrees, because a lot of times they are doing them in radians, which are not going to give you the numbers that we want. So let's continue now so you can just see what this experiment looks like. Subject here all set up to take measurements. You can see her leg has the ruler taped onto it, and the ruler extends almost to the ground, but not quite, because obviously you want it to swing freely. Then on the ground, we have a meter stick, and we want to set it up so the stick is measuring right at 0 when she's relaxed and her leg is hanging vertically. So I'll double check here, and do that. So now it's at 0. So as she kicks out, like you can show as your leg kicks out, that angle or the line, you're going to have to kind of approximate where does that line meet the ruler here, and that would be this distance we're calling A. The distance from whatever pivot point to the ground, that's going to be the distance we're calling B. And then obviously you can use those two to calculate the angle. So when you're going to do this, it takes a little while. You can go up and down her kneecap, where that tibial tuberosity is, and kind of play around. Find, oh, that wasn't the right spot exactly. That was the right spot. So you can see that, and you can put a little piece of tape and make it easier to find again. Obviously, if you go and nothing happens, don't take that data. And spend a little bit of time seeing if you can get a consistent response before you actually start getting the data. So we can do this. So right now, my subject is sitting there relaxed. We're going to get kind of our baseline measurement of the magnitude. So I'm getting ready to go. And I'm also taking a look. In fact, I'm going to just shift my position here so I'll be able to see how this goes out. So you probably don't see me here on the camera. And we go. I'm going to do 3. So that went out like maybe 9 centimeters. You don't need to take this data. This data is just kind of showing you what it looks like. Yeah. Maybe do it again. Maybe that went out like 7.5 centimeters. And we'll do it one more time. That one went out more like 16 centimeters. Here, our subject is going to do Gendrasic's maneuver. So you can see she's holding her, or pulling her hands apart, and she's going to hold that tension while we do the reflex. So we're going to do this again. And now she's in Gendrasic's maneuver, coming in. And wow. So we saw there was definitely a stronger response there. That went out to maybe like 19 or so centimeters. We're going to do it one more time. Yeah, she's still holding there. That was probably like 21 centimeters. We'll do one more. That was another 19 centimeters. So there we got our data. We have 3 readings for the baseline, 3 readings for the Gendrasic's maneuver. We're going to have to convert those into angles and get averages and see that.
Okay, so we're going to test the Achilles tendon reflex, and so I will aim right here. If you want to try this at home on someone in your family, you can use your hand like kind of karate chop and get a similar reaction. And you want to try a Gendrasic maneuver? All right. So I wasn't sure if that was larger, but maybe.
Yeah, I think that feels good more. And now Gendrasic's.
All right, Gendrasic.
Make a difference. All right, so you get the idea there. You'll be in your groups. Work together. Make sure so you're going to write all the same measurements as if they were your subject, and then work together. Make sure you all reach a consensus about. You should come up with basically 2 angles, right? The average magnitude for just the baseline reflex and the average angle for the Gendrasic's maneuver. So ultimately each group should come up with 2 angles, which then will be the ones we use in the group data. Okay, so now that you've got that, I am going to share screen. So this doing the reflex lab now exists. If you go into your module for the reflex lab here, here's the module. There is now one called doing the reflex lab. After we're done talking, I'll also publish, submit PDF of reflex lab. But for right now, doing the reflex lab. There's the little video you just saw. Whoa, gotta be in here. All right. Here's what, I'm sorry, I got a yellow jacket flying right around my face. All right, we are now all good. Here is the data. I kind of made it all pretty. It's kind of burgundy and gold. If you click on that, I'm gonna open it in Excel. And now I need to share my Excel screen with you. So, yep. What? Screen sharing. Why did my screen sharing just stop? Share screen. There it goes. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Doobie-doo, zoom to selection. That's what's gonna, there we go. All right, so here we have all this data. This should be, tell me if this is not the data that you actually calculated. This should be, I kind of did backwards math and stuff, trying to come up with numbers that are going to come up with the right things. I don't have people's old lab books. I had to kind of actually figure out, kind of back calculate what must have their measurements been to actually have done this data. But does this look like what you got for each of the groups? Okay. And so if we look on average, does the data support your hypotheses? Just anybody?
Yes.
Yes, it does. In general, when you did gymnastics, you had a greater response. Does that mean that that was what every subject saw? If we take a look, it's like, no. There's this one subject, subject 4, where we actually got the opposite results. Wait, no, not that subject, this subject. Got the opposite results. You know, and what might have been happening? What are sources of variability there?
Nerve damage.
Could be there's just something weird about their nervous system that they have a different response than, you know, that's very atypical. And what are other possibilities?
Experimenter error. They weren't hitting in the same spot each time, or
Yeah,
just not getting a good reaction.
I suspect, I mean, that's where I suspect it's most likely. You know, if you're going to do this, you know, in a clinical setting, you get a lot more training on how to actually get a consistent response. So, you know, for whatever reason, they got atypical results, but because we have a bunch of subjects and we can see, like, you know, in general, we see facilitation, and intuitively it feels good. Like 4 out of the 5 subjects, you know, exhibited that. I'm saying, like, this is supporting my hypothesis pretty well. And then if I look again at the Achilles, which was, is this qualitative or quantitative? When we said just, you know, +1. Say it again.
Qualitative.
That's qualitative, right? So does everybody remember the difference between qualitative versus quantitative? What does it mean to be qualitative?
There's no numerical data.
Yeah, there's no numerical values. Qualitative is like it's bigger or it's smaller. Whereas this is quantitative, right? Because we actually have numerical measurements here. This would be quantitative.
That's a stupid question. What does average second mean? Oh, I don't understand where that came in. For B?
That's okay. That's because I used another table from another lab and then modified it rather than creating it from scratch. And the lab that I modified was measuring things in seconds rather than in degrees. So it says seconds because I spazzed. So thank you for that. And I'm going to have to, yeah, oh shucks. I'm going to fix that, and it will be fixed for you guys. And I got to send a blast out to the other teachers because all their students are going to be also saying the same thing. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, no problem. Please. Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
With the Achilles one, so 1 means it was greater, 0 was the same, -1 it was less.
Correct.
Okay, all right.
And again, this same group, didn't see anything here. Who knows what's up with group with subject 3. Could be subject 3 is atypical, or group 3 is kind of sloppy in their methodology. I'm not sure. So for part 1, this is what all you need. You use your subject, then obviously you're going to have to print out the data, or you could even write it down if you don't want to print it out. There's not a whole lot here, but you definitely need to have the full class data, and then your discussion. What's the first part of a discussion always for one of these hypothesis driven labs?
Does the data support your hypothesis?
Exactly. So the first part is looking to see whether or not your hypothesis is supported or not. And then beyond that, you can develop it a little bit. Things that would be worth talking about in your discussion was that you did have atypical subjects here that, what does that mean? And does that cause you to really distrust your results, or is it like just seem like, there's always going to be things that are kind of off and random, but in the big picture, it looks pretty consistent, which, I think it does. But so that, that's the kind of stuff you'd put in a discussion. Like if there's a typical subject, what might it mean? So stuff like that.
So our group was group 2. So should our data match subject 2?
Does it?
No, well, it's off a little bit.
By how much?
For the first one, I got 11.7, so that's almost right, and then 20.5 for with Gendrastics.
Huh. I might have spazzed in some of the spreadsheets I was doing.
No, we got that. That was for the average of the measurements.
Oh, you're right. Sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it does. Sorry about that. Yeah, it looks right.
Okay, good. I'm glad.
All right.
Okay. So any questions about this part 1? And like I don't know if I said it while everybody was in the group, do this at home. It's, even though you don't have to do it for your lab, it's cool, it's fun. It's also just something a lot of times people have always heard of or seen in a cartoon. It's like some cartoon character hits somebody's kneecap, and then they kick out and they launch them across the room or something. It's like, ha, but it's like, it's actually kind of fun to see for real. Like, oh my God, it actually works. You hit their patellar tendon and they kick out. You tap on the back of their calcaneal tendon and they plantar flex. So it's fun to actually see this in real life as an actual real world phenomenon, rather than just something you've always kind of known through pop culture. So,
Professor, one thing, I did it to my husband because I didn't know about the Gendrastics maneuver, and not just it was increased, it feels, you can feel the difference in the movement. It's, yeah. I don't know, it's a very strange sensation with Gendrastics.
Yeah, no, your whole system gets more excitable. So it's, again, it's kind of, I think about it kind of like, if you're, the days before COVID, when people used to be able to touch each other, like if you were just hanging out and some friend taps you on the shoulder, hey, what's up? That's just normal. But if you were in some slasher movie and you knew like half your friends were already dead and there's some person with an axe somewhere in the shadows, and then you feel something on you, you go, wah! Right? Everything is like at a much higher excitability level. So when you're doing this, all your neurons are kind of closer to threshold. The same kind of stimulus is going to end up giving you a larger response there. So, anyway, so the next part of today's lab, which we're going to do, normally you would do these on each other. Again, one of the things that's silly, even if we did in-person labs, we couldn't do this because you can't like get close and touch each other. So instead, we're going to just kind of go over a number of reflexes. You need to know them because they are classic reflexes that are used like in clinical assessment in neurological exams. They bring up interesting theoretical ideas around consensual and ipsilateral and contralateral responses, whether things are integrated on one side of the body or on both sides of the body. So you do need to know these reflexes. I'll show you little YouTube videos of them, which you also can link to. I have them in the page. We'll talk about them a bit. In your lab notebook, you should kind of describe what they look like when you see them on YouTube. You know, these don't need major discussions, but you should at least address some of the main questions like in the lab book about what is going on in this and what are kind of the take-home messages about this particular reflex that you're seeing. So let's do that. I'm going to share about this. It's going to be a disaster here if I don't be careful. I'm going to share my screen again. There's some vocabulary you're going to need before we go into this. I need a less crazy, there, almost there. So these words are used a lot. Contralateral means opposite side. Ipsilateral means the same side. Right, so if we have like for like that knee-jerk response, was that an ipsilateral or a contralateral response?
Ipsy.
The ipsilateral response, right? We hit the right knee, it's the right leg that kicks out. You hit the left knee, the left leg kicks out. So these stretch reflexes are ipsilateral. Another ipsilateral reflex that, you know, are withdrawal reflexes. So this was like the stretch reflex was like this. Withdrawal reflexes, these are just where you pull a limb back from a painful stimulus, right? If you step on a tack, you pull your foot up. If you touch a hot stove, you pull your hand back. So these withdrawal reflexes are also ipsilateral. If you touch your right hand on the stove, your right hand goes back. If you step on a tack with your left foot comes up, pulls away from the pain. There are also contralateral reflexes. An example would be the crossed extensor reflex. This one actually pairs with the withdrawal reflex. If you have a painful stimulus, you contract the thing that is on the side with the pain, like you pull your foot up or you pull your arm back, but you extend the opposite side. So if you step on a tack, There's a little tack he just stepped on there. There's going to be two things that happen. There's going to be this ipsilateral withdrawal reflex where he like pulls his foot up away from the tack. But then a crossed extensor where the other leg actually tightens up and extends down. You know, what is the purpose of a crossed extensor reflex in this case?
Stronger
Prevent that you fall.
reaction.
So you don't like fall, right? If you're pulling up this foot in this withdrawal reflex, you would topple. But instead you have another reflex happening at the same time that extends on the opposite side of the body to stabilize you. So that's an example of a contralateral response, right? You can have the stimulus is on one side, but the response is on the opposite side of the body. And then we have what are called consensual responses. So consensual, there's ipsilateral and also contralateral. So the stimulus comes in on one side, but the response is on both sides. So when we do like pupillary reflexes, there's different things that will make your pupils constrict or dilate. And some of them are only going to affect the side that you're stimulating. Some of them are actually going to be, these have consensual responses where you have not only a response in the eye that you're stimulating, but in the other eye as well that doesn't get stimulated. So that's part of our lab today, is seeing how different kinds of reflexes can have different kinds of responses. It gives you some insight into the wiring of how these responses work, even, you know, whether or not the wiring crosses to the other side of the brain or not. While we're talking about the eye, all right, so there's an eye. Normally we would have gone a little, on Thursday, we're going to kind of introduce all the different divisions of the nervous system. I'm going to have to start right now, though. The eye has a pupil, which most people know, but what is the actual pupil?
It's a muscle.
The hole. It's a
Hole.
hole. It's just a hole. The only reason it looks black is because it's going into the inside of the eyeball where it's not lit up, right? If you have take a flash picture of somebody and illuminate, the pupil looks red. You get red eye because you get to see the blood vessels inside the eyeball. So the pupil is just a hole. And then you have muscles that make the iris. And there's muscles that are more longitudinal. When they contract, they'll make the pupil wider, you know, dilate the pupil. The division of the nervous system that dilates the pupil, this is something I'll introduce now. We'll talk again more and more, but you should know. Does anybody have a sense? What division of the nervous system makes your pupils dilate? Wide-eyed.
Parasympathetic.
Empathetic.
Sympathetic.
It's going to be sympathetic. That's that fight or flight. right? You kind of think of that wide-eyed with fright. You know, it's like, "Ah!" and their eyes are like saucers. So parasympathetic, on the other hand, is going to constrict the pupils, make them smaller. So constriction is going to be parasympathetic. It's one of the, when, like opiates make your pupils get small. Everything is, there's nothing wrong at all. Everything is perfect. There's nothing I got to worry about. And your pupils are really narrow. Psychedelics are told pupil dilators. It's like, whoa, the world is just crazy. And your eyes look like saucers. Yeah, different kinds of drugs have very kind of predictable effects on people's pupils. But for right now, just when we're thinking about these pupillary reflexes, you do want to keep in mind that the sympathetic division of the, and we're going to put this into context on Monday, so don't get too worried about it. These are basically autonomic motor pathways. They're operating muscles that are not voluntary, the things that are operated automatically. So this is part of your autonomic motor. But we're going to see something that, one thing that dilates, one thing that constricts, one thing that's just ipsilateral, one thing that has consensual responses. So I just wanted to kind of give you that background. With that, I think I'm just gonna kind of go through some of these, rap a little bit about them. You don't necessarily have to write right now in your lab notebook because this is recorded. All these videos I'm going to show you are linked in the page. So you can just kind of sit back and enjoy the ride right now.
Do you want a small discussion of each reflex, or should we just wait till the end?
No, I would say this one makes more sense to kind of address them because each one is very kind of specialized, what the questions are and what it's kind of illustrating. You might have like some wrap up in general, like this is my take home message from everything, but kind of for the specific little questions that I'm asking you to answer, I think it makes sense to be more localized with the description of the reflex itself.
Thank you.
All right, I am doing the reflex lab again. So plantar reflex. Let's talk about,
hey everyone.
Oh, stop. Oh. Hold on, she's kind of shrill. So sorry about that. She's like very excited, but she caught me off guard there. All right, so plantar reflex. From anybody who's been in anatomy, what is the anatomical regional term plantar mean?
The bottom of the foot.
The bottom of the foot. So plantar reflex is when you basically pull a little, usually a little stylus of some sort along the bottom of the foot, and in general, it makes your toes curl. And that is the appropriate response. If you do this and their toes kind of curl in a little bit, that's a good sign. Unless you're a baby, like this is one of the things they do to newborns. They drag a little stick on the sole of the foot of the baby. And in that case, the toes actually go outward. So that's called Babinski's sign. Babinski's sign is if your toes actually flay upward and outward rather than curl in. As a baby, that is totally appropriate. That is the appropriate response. After like a year or two, and the motor pathways get more myelinated and all that, then you get the more mature reflex, which is the toes curling inward. If your toes curl outward when they do this and you're an adult, that's a sign of motor damage to your motor pathways. So I will say that doing this reflex, this can be a trickier one to actually do. You can try to do this on somebody at home. I find I'm like about 75% successful at making it happen when I try my best at it. But I don't have clinical training. So just to say, this one's not as easy to make happen consistently like the knee jerk. And also I would say one of the, I was looking all over for like a real Babinski sign, but all of these ones that are displaying, you know, regular and Babinski, you know, it's obvious that the subject in the video is just making it up. Because it's like the same person. It's like, oh, here, look, this is a normal toe curl. You know, if it was Babinski's and I do this same person, their toes go out. So it's like, that's not a freaking reflex. That's this person voluntarily making their toes go in and out. So this is a kind of simulation, you know, which is fine. So there are other people that do this, but this woman actually has a lot of things out there. She actually does a good job, you know, kind of showing and explaining things. Although, yeah, again, she's a little, her voice is a little hard for me. But here she goes.
It's Sarah with RegisteredNurseRN.com, and in this video, I'm going to be going over the plantar reflex. What I'm going to do for you is I'm going to go over the basics about this reflex, and then I'm going to demonstrate for you on a person what a positive and negative plantar reflex looks like with the Babinski sign. So first, let's talk about what the plantar reflex is. This is a superficial reflex found on the bottom of the foot. Now, this is different than the deep tendon reflexes that we covered in the previous videos, in that these reflexes are due to the receptors found on the skin. And what we do is we elicit a reflex through the skin rather than the muscle, like how you do in the deep tendons. Now, whenever you do a plantar reflex, you're looking for the Babinski sign. And the Babinski sign, which you'll see here in a minute, you'll see a positive and a negative one. And whenever you see a positive Babinski sign, this is abnormal. You will see dorsiflexion of the big toes and fanning of the toes. So in other words, you're going to see the big toe and the toes dorsiflex, which means they're going to move out like that. And this is common. Now, this is a normal sign if you are doing this on an infant less than 24 months of age. But if you're not, it can be indicative of upper motor neuron disease. Now, if a negative Babinski sign, which is normal, you want to see this in someone 24 months or older, it's where you have plantar flexion and curling of the toes with flexion of the forefoot. So you'll see the toes sort of plantar flex in and curl. So now let me demonstrate for you what that looks like. Okay, for the plantar reflex, we're taking L4 to S2. And what we're going to do is we're going to lightly stroke.
So if you've been in anatomy, do you remember what those are referring to? What's L4 to S2?
Lumbar and
Spinal nerves.
Those are spinal nerves that are coming out from the lower lumbar and upper sacral region there.
Up the lateral side of the sole of the foot, inward through to the ball of the foot to make like an upside down J. And what we're watching for, we're going to look at the toes, and we want for a normal response for it to plantar flex and for the toes to curl inward. Positive Babinski sign would be whenever the foot dorsiflex and the big toe fans out. So let's see what we get. Okay, and that was plantar flexion. Notice that the toes, they curled inward. Let's do it again. And they curled inward. So this is normal. Okay, let's see what a positive Babinski sign looks like. And notice we had dorsiflexion of the foot and the toes fanned out. Let's do it again. Okay, so that is how you check the plantar reflex. Be sure to check out my other reflex examination videos, and thank you so much for watching, and please consider subscribing to this YouTube channel.
All right. Righty there. So she does a good job of kind of explaining it and showing that. Again, obviously that subject was making up his Babinski sign there because, you know, but that's what it would look like. And again, this is something you can try to do on somebody at home. You know, like I said, though, it's a little trickier. Like I find about 75% of the time when I do it on some random person that I can get a definitive little toe curl. But sometimes it's just frustrating. It's like, I can't make it happen. All right. Any questions about that one? Okay. I need to let's go back. We're going to run out of time again. We're going to be all right. All right, let's go to share screen. Corneal reflex. So this one kind of freaks people out a little bit sometimes because the idea is you are going to actually touch the front of somebody's eyeball when it's open. You basically touch their cornea. The cornea is the little window into their eye, the little clear window of the fibrous tunic where the light comes in. But it's tough. Your eyeball is tough. Your eyeball does not pop very easily, especially from a wisp of cotton. So you're basically going to touch somebody, the front of their eye with a wisp of cotton. You're not going to hurt them at all, but there are very sensitive touch receptors in the cornea, in that little clear window into the eye. And so you take this little wisp of cotton, you have them open their eyes, looking out straight ahead, and you literally touch the front of their eye, physically touch it, and then you see what happens. And here we have this woman demonstrating for your pleasure.
I'm now checking for the corneal reflex, testing cranial nerve 5. To perform this reflex, you will need a cotton applicator or a cotton ball. Take the cotton tip and pull it out to a wisp. You will approach the patient from the side and ask him to look straight ahead for me, please.
Okay.
And you will look for a blink response when you touch the wisp to the eye. Look good straight ahead for me, please.
All right, so, you know, that's pretty simple, and it's not that shocking what you see, but it's still, it's showing that the nervous system is functioning properly, that the cranial nerve
The
is
corneal
transmitting.
reflex is a protective reflex that occurs when the cornea of either eye.
What do you think is the function of this corneal reflex?
Is the corneal reflex just the eyes closing?
Yeah, it's that blinking, the blinking in response to the physical touch of the cornea.
Protection?
Yeah, protection. It's like something's touching your eye, you're going to shut your eyes to try to keep your eyes safe from whatever's coming in and intruding, right? So it's a pretty straightforward thing, but it's also a useful, it's easy, it's giving you important information. Stephen, yeah. And don't use a pencil. You use a wisp of cotton. You can. I don't want to have anybody be like that little kid in the Christmas story. You'll put your eye out there.
I've got a serious, like some people, if I go anywhere near my eye, it'll start blinking already. Like I could never wear contacts.
Yeah, so that I'm not sure about, but eyelashes too. Like if you touch your eyelashes, that usually triggers it as well. But so I'm looking at the time. You know, I would say. Yeah, I'm going to just say we're going to finish this up and we're going to do the Yeah, the reality is yeah, there's enough time to move things a little bit. So I left wiggle room in here. So let us just say, and we're going to finish these on Thursday. We're not going to do the nerve stimulation on Thursday. I think we're going to do that Tuesday. Just to, yeah, let's make that be the thing. That way you can just kind of shake off, relax from your exams. If you haven't turned in your labs, do that. I'm finally digging into them. It's like slow, but kind of steady. If I'm giving you feedback and you've got like a really like low score on one of these labs as I'm handing back to you, you know, you could just leave it with that score, you know, but I really recommend you have the option of revising and resubmitting it for a better score, which is going to be good for you. So you're kind of understanding the material and good for your grade because you've got more points. So any other comments or questions? Yes, Lauren.